The planet was quiet, yet it never felt safe. The human explorer walked slowly across the rocky surface, scanning the strange ground with cautious eyes. His ship had landed hours earlier, and he was ordered to study the caves nearby. The air was thin, but his suit helped him breathe. The sun above was dim and cold, casting long shadows over the endless desert. He thought he was ready for anything, but he was not ready for what was waiting below. The caves opened like dark mouths in the ground, wide and silent. He stepped closer, shining his small light into the opening. The beam of his torch caught the edges of glowing crystals, blue and green, shimmering like stars. Curiosity pulled him forward, deeper into the mouth of the earth. Each step echoed on the stone walls, each sound reminding him that he was alone. Still, he kept moving, because this was his mission, and because humans are always hungry to know what lies ahead. At first, the path seemed easy, but then the ground trembled slightly, a warning he ignored. He took another step, and suddenly the floor gave way, rocks cracked under his boots, and in a heartbeat, he was falling. The world spun. In flashes of light and dust, his body hit sharp stone, then slid down into a dark pit. When he finally stopped, the silence was heavy, broken only by his harsh breathing. Pain spread through his legs and shoulders. He tried to stand, but the fall had left him weak. He touched his helmet, cracked but still working. His flashlight flickered, then steadied, revealing the vast chamber. Around him, the ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows. Strange roots hung down like twisted ropes, dripping with glowing liquid. The floor was uneven, scattered with broken stones and shards of crystal. He realized he was deep underground, cut off from the surface, and no signal from his ship reached him here. Fear crawled into his chest. He tried to climb back, but the walls were smooth and wet. Every time he grabbed a rock, it slipped from his hands. There was no way up, no way out, only darkness. He shouted into his radio, but no answer came. The silence of the cave pressed against him, as if the planet itself wanted him to vanish. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in the dark. Thirst began to dry his mouth. Hunger twisted his stomach. He searched the ground, hoping for something useful, but found nothing except stones and dust. His light caught the reflection of crystal shards, glowing faintly as if alive. He wondered if they were safe, if they could hold energy or poison, but he was too weak to test them, too tired to think clearly. For the first time in his life, he felt he might die alone, forgotten in the deep. Then he heard it, a sound soft at first, like water dripping, but as it grew closer, he realized it was not water. It was footsteps, light and careful, echoing from the tunnel ahead. He froze, holding his breath. Listening, the footsteps stopped. Silence returned. His heart pounded in his chest, louder than the cave itself. Something was there, watching. He raised his weak light toward the sound. The beam touched a shadow moving slowly between the rocks. Two bright eyes glowed back at him, unblinking and strange. The human's chest tightened, fear mixing with curiosity. He could not speak, could not even call out. The shadow moved closer, step by step, until it stood just beyond the edge of his light. For a long moment, neither moved. Only the cave breathed around them. The figure stepped forward at last, and the light revealed her shape. It was a girl, or something close to a girl. Her skin glowed softly, pale and almost transparent. Her hair floated lightly as if water surrounded her, though there was none. Her large eyes reflected the crystals, shining with both strangeness and warmth. The human's fear grew sharper, yet he felt no threat. She carried something in her. Small hands, a strange fruit, glowing faintly. She placed it carefully on a stone between them, then stepped back into the half-shadow. The human stared at the fruit. His body trembled with hunger, but his mind warned him it could be poison. He looked at the girl, who stood silently, her eyes fixed on him. No words, no sounds. Only waiting. At last his hunger won. He reached out, picked up the fruit, and took a slow bite. The taste was sweet, refreshing, unlike anything he had known. Energy flowed through his tired body, and for the first time since the fall, hope flickered inside him. The girl tilted her head, watching. She said nothing, but he felt her presence like a lifeline in the dark. The cave was still dangerous, still unknown, but he was not alone anymore, and in that moment, deep underground on a world far from Earth, a fragile thread of survival was born. The human sat in the silence of the cavern, still tasting the strange sweetness of the fruit. His body felt stronger, though his mind was full of questions. Who was this glowing girl, and why had she helped him? Was she even real? Or some vision created by his desperate mind? But when he lifted his eyes, she was still there, standing just at the edge of his light, watching. Her presence was both strange and calming. Not a monster, not a ghost, but something different. Something alive. She moved closer again, her steps almost floating across the stone. The light from her skin shimmered against the cave walls, making the crystals glitter like stars. The human noticed how delicate she looked, as if she was made of fragile glass, yet her gaze was steady, filled with intelligence and something deeper. When she reached the broken stones, she pointed at his injured leg. Her fingers glowed faintly, and she bent down to touch the ground near him. From her hand, a soft pulse of light spread across the stone. Moss-like plants glowed in response, releasing droplets of shining water. She picked some of it and held it out to him, a silent offering. The human hesitated again, fear battling with need, but thirst was stronger, and when he sipped the glowing liquid, it was cool and sweet. Relief washed through him, every nerve alive again. He looked at her in wonder, unable to speak her language, so instead, he raised a hand and touched his chest, giving a small nod. It was a gesture of thanks, simple but honest. She tilted her head, studying him as if learning what it meant. Then slowly, she raised her own hand to her chest and nodded back. In that moment, a bridge formed between them, fragile yet real. The girl crouched down near him but kept a safe distance. Her eyes shifted often, scanning the shadows as if she knew dangers were near. The human followed her gaze and realized they were not alone in this cavern. Far away, deeper in the tunnels, low growls echoed. The sound was faint but unmistakable. Predators lived here, hunters of the dark. The girl's kindness was not only mercy, it was also warning. She was showing him that survival here meant silence, caution, and trust. Hours passed, though the human could not measure them in the dark. The girl returned again and again, each time bringing something new. Strange berries that glowed faintly, roots that could be chewed for energy. Sometimes she brought pieces of cloth-like material, woven from fibers unknown. She would leave them near him and then sit quietly, as if waiting. The human realized she was studying him as much as he studied her. Each time he drew shapes on the ground, circles, lines, a stick figure of a human. She would watch, then respond with symbols of her own, spirals, stars, and flowing patterns. It was not a language yet, but it was communication. And every small exchange pulled them closer. One night, when he was resting against the stone, he noticed her watching him more closely. Her expression carried curiosity, but also sadness. He wondered if she had family, or if she was completely alone down here. The thought made his chest heavy, because he too was alone, cut off from his people. Perhaps that was why she helped him, not just kindness, but loneliness. Two lost beings finding each other in the dark. Still questions filled his mind. Was she truly a girl? Or some ancient being much older than she appeared? Was she leading him to safety? Or was this part of something larger? The cave gave no answers. Only silence. One time, as he rested, the ground shook suddenly. Dust fell from the ceiling. Rocks shifted with a rumble. The girl leapt to her feet instantly, her glowing eyes sharp. She gestured quickly, waving him to stay silent. Then she pressed a hand to the wall. The glowing roots responded, dimming their light for a moment. The cavern seemed to hold its breath. Then the sound came, a distant roar, deep and violent. The human froze, his blood cold. The girl's face was calm but tense. She had heard this many times before. Whatever monster lived here was awake again. He realized he was in a place where death walked freely, and the only reason he was still alive was because of her. When the danger passed, the girl sat back down. Her glow returned, soft and steady. She pulled something from a pouch tied at her side. It was a crystal shard. Glowing brighter than the others, she placed it between them, pointing first at it, then at him, then at herself. The human understood. This was a symbol, a sign of connection. The shard pulsed faintly, as if alive. He reached out and touched it, and for a moment, warmth filled his hand, not just heat, but a strange energy. The girl smiled softly. The first expression of emotion she had shown. It was small, almost hidden, but it reached him like light in the darkness. He realized then that he was no longer only a visitor or a prisoner of this underground world. He was now part of a fragile bond. The girl had chosen to help him, to share her food, her water, and even her secrets, and in return, he offered his trust, his will to survive, and his human spirit. Together they were no longer alone. Together, they faced the darkness, and though the beast still roamed the tunnels, though the earth still threatened to collapse, there was a spark of something stronger than fear, a spark that might grow into hope, a spark that could one day lead to escape. The human awoke to the faint glow of crystals above him. His body was sore, his stomach empty, but he was alive, and once again, she was there, the alien girl, sitting quietly near the wall, her glowing skin casting gentle light. Across the cavern, she did not speak, yet her presence was as loud as any voice. It reminded him that in this endless darkness, he was not completely alone. She brought more food that day. Strange roots that looked like twisted ropes. When he bit into them, they tasted bitter at first, then sweet. The girl watched carefully, as if learning from his reaction. When he gave a small smile and nodded, she mimicked his gesture, tilting her head with curiosity. It was clumsy, but it was communication. Every gesture, every small expression was slowly becoming their language. Two beings from different worlds finding a way to understand each other. The human wanted to tell her his name. He tapped his chest and spoke softly, "Daniel." The sound echoed in the cavern, carried into the dark tunnels. She blinked, then tapped her own chest and whispered something soft, almost like a song. The word was strange to his ears, flowing like water, but he repeated it clumsily. She gave the smallest laugh, light and short. It was the first time he had heard her make such a sound. It felt like warmth spreading in the cold. Day by day, their bond grew. He showed her how to draw simple shapes on the ground: circle for the sun, triangle for a mountain, square for a shelter. She responded with her own symbols: spiral for water, star for light, wave for danger. Through these crude drawings, they shared thoughts. They told each other stories without words. The human spoke of Earth by scratching a circle with small dots around it, trying to show his world and its moon. The girl responded by drawing many circles, connected with lines, as if showing the stars and planets she knew. It was not perfect, but it was enough to remind them that even here, in the dark, knowledge and connection could grow. But not all moments were safe. One evening, as they sat near the glowing moss, a sound shook the cavern. It was not the roar of the great beast, but something smaller, closer and faster. From the shadows crawled creatures with sharp legs and glowing fangs. They were no larger than wolves, but their hunger was clear. The girl jumped to her feet, pulling the human back. She grabbed a crystal shard and struck it against the wall, releasing a burst of light. The creatures hissed, shrinking away from the sudden brightness, but they did not leave. They circled, waiting. The human felt his heart race. He grabbed a broken stone and stood beside her. Two figures against the dark, fragile but determined. When one creature leapt, the human swung the rock with all his strength. The blow landed, the creature screeched, and its body fell against the ground. The others hissed louder, but the girl raised her glowing hands and pressed them against the wall. The moss flared brighter, flooding the cavern with light. The creatures hissed again, retreating into the shadows. The danger was gone, but the human's chest still pounded. He looked at her, breathing hard, realizing that without her, he would already be dead. She looked back, and for the first time, her expression softened. It was respect, maybe even trust. After the attack, they rested near the crystals. The human's hands were cut, his body bruised, but the girl reached out gently. Her glowing fingers touched his skin, and warmth spread through the wounds. The pain lessened, the bleeding slowed. Her touch was strange but comforting. He whispered, "Thank you," knowing she would not understand the words, but she nodded, as if she felt the meaning behind them. The days blurred together, though underground, time had no real measure. He grew stronger from the food and water she provided. She grew more open, sitting closer, sometimes studying his strange clothes, his broken tools, his helmet. She tapped the helmet with curiosity, and he removed it, showing her his face fully for the first time. Her eyes widened, glowing brighter. She touched her own face, then his, comparing the differences. Her skin was soft and warm, like smooth stone touched by sunlight. The human did not pull away. Instead, he let the moment linger, because in that touch, there was no fear, only connection. But in the quiet hours, the cavern still reminded them of danger. Strange roars echoed in the distance. The ground trembled now and then, warning that the tunnels were never stable. Every sound in the dark could be a threat. The human began to realize that survival here was not just about food and water. It was about trust, about standing together when the shadows moved. And though he had known her only for a short time, he already felt that bond fragile, but strong enough to keep him alive. One night, as he tried to sleep, he thought of Earth. He imagined the blue sky, the warmth of the sun, the sound of wind. In trees, he wondered if he would ever see it again. But when he opened his eyes, he saw her sitting nearby, glowing softly, watching over him, and for the first time, he thought that maybe survival here was not impossible. Not with her. The darkness was vast, the dangers endless, but the bond between them was real. A fragile bond, born of loneliness, trust, and survival. And in the deep underground, that bond was the only light they had. The human woke to the sound of dripping water echoing through the cavern. The alien girl was already awake, moving quietly along the wall. Her glowing skin painted the stones with soft light. She stopped, pressed her ear against the rock, and listened. Her eyes narrowed. Then she turned to him, motioning for silence. He obeyed, holding his breath, waiting. The cave whispered with strange sounds, distant rumbles, shifting earth, and faint growls that sent a chill into his bones. After a long moment, she relaxed, her glow brightening again. She pointed toward a narrow tunnel hidden behind a curtain of glowing roots. The human followed her carefully, his body still aching from the fall. The tunnel was tight, twisting like a serpent, the walls wet and cold. His shoulders brushed against strange crystals that hummed faintly as he passed. The girl moved ahead of him, silent as a shadow. Her glowing hair guided him like a lantern in the dark. After a while, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The sight before him stole his breath. The cavern stretched wide like a cathedral of stone. Pillars of crystal rose from the ground to the ceiling, glowing in waves of blue and green. The walls were carved with strange markings, symbols too precise to be natural. It was not just a cave. It was a place once lived in, once built by someone. The girl walked to the center and placed her hand on one of the carvings. The markings glowed faintly under her touch. She looked at him, then tapped her chest and bowed her head. He understood this was her people's place, a forgotten home. Deep underground, the human's heart tightened. He realized she was not only helping him, she was showing him her past, her secrets, her world. He stepped closer to the walls, tracing the symbols with his fingers. They told stories, though he could not read them. Shapes of tall figures with glowing eyes, holding crystals, walking under stars. Other carvings showed beasts with sharp teeth and long claws, chasing the glowing people into caves. The girl watched him carefully, her eyes filled with a sorrow he did not need words to understand. Her people had been hunted, driven underground, and perhaps destroyed. She was alone because they were gone. The girl moved to another wall and pressed her hand against it. A hidden door opened with a soft rumble, stones sliding apart. Behind it was a smaller chamber. Filled with broken objects, the human stepped inside, amazed. There were tools shaped from crystal, fragments of armor, and even strange machines covered in dust. One of them hummed faintly, alive after all this time. The girl touched it with care, and the machine responded with a pulse of light. He realized then that this underground world was not only a tomb. It was a place of knowledge, a place holding secrets that had survived long after her people had vanished. The human picked up a crystal shard from the ground. It glowed warmly in his hand, vibrating like it had energy within. The girl nodded and pointed at the shard, then at his chest. He understood she wanted him to keep it. A gift, a bond between them. He tucked it carefully into his pocket, feeling its faint hum against his side. It was not just a tool, it was a symbol of trust. And trust was the most valuable thing in the darkness. They explored further, moving through chambers filled with ruins. Some rooms held broken statues, tall figures with faces much like hers. Others held pools of glowing water, still and silent. In one chamber, a massive root from above pierced through the ceiling, dripping glowing liquid into a basin carved in stone. The girl drank from it and gestured for him to do the same. The water was cool, filling him with energy stronger than any food, he felt. His body healing slowly, his strength returning. He looked at her with gratitude, and she simply nodded. This was her world, and now she was sharing it with him. But the beauty of the underground carried danger too. While they walked, the ground shook violently, dust rained from the ceiling, and a deep roar echoed through the tunnels. The girl froze, fear flashing in her glowing eyes. She grabbed his hand for the first time, pulling him toward another passage. Her grip was strong despite her delicate frame. The roar came again, closer, shaking the walls. He stumbled, nearly falling, but she pulled him forward with surprising strength. They ran through the twisting tunnel until the sound finally faded. When they stopped, both were breathing hard. She looked at him, her eyes wide, and for the first time, he saw real fear in her. In the silence that followed, he realized something. The underground was not only home to her people's memory, it was also the lair of the monsters that had destroyed them. The beasts were not gone, they were still here, hunting in the dark, and sooner or later, they would find him. The girl must have known this all along. Her kindness was not just about helping the stranger. It was also about survival, hers and his, bound together, that night. As they rested in one of the ancient chambers, the human studied the glowing shard she had given him. Its faint hum seemed to match the rhythm of his heartbeat. He wondered if it held some power he did not yet understand. Perhaps it was a tool, perhaps a weapon, perhaps something far greater. The girl sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the crystal, her face calm but distant. She carried centuries of sorrow in her silence, yet also hope. And in that silence, the human understood. The underground was not only a prison, it was also a place of secrets waiting to be revealed. And those secrets could mean survival or destruction. Either way, their fragile bond had now become something stronger. They were no longer just two survivors, they were keepers of a forgotten world. The underground had grown quiet, too quiet. The human and the alien girl rested in one of the ruined chambers, their backs against a wall of broken stone. The air was heavy, thick with silence. Even the glowing moss seemed dimmer, as if the cavern itself was holding its breath. The girl's glowing eyes shifted often toward the tunnels, her body tense. She could feel it before he could. The presence of something vast and dangerous, a predator moving in the deep. The human had heard its roar before, distant and muffled. But now the sound came closer, shaking the walls like thunder. Dust rained from above. Pebbles tumbled down the walls. The ground trembled beneath them with every step the creature took. The girl grabbed his arm, her face sharp with warning. Her mouth moved, whispering words he could not understand, but the meaning was clear. They had to hide. She pulled him toward a narrow crack between two fallen pillars. They slipped inside, crouching in the shadows. The human held his breath as the cavern shook again. Then he saw it. The beast emerged from the tunnel like a nightmare-given form. Its body was massive, armored with jagged plates of bone. 4 long legs dug into the stone with claws as sharp as knives. Its head was low and wide, with a jaw that dripped glowing saliva. But its eyes were the worst, glowing red like burning coals, sweeping across the chamber. The creature sniffed the air, growling low. The sound rattled through the human's bones, making his chest feel hollow. The girl's hand gripped his tightly, urging him not to move, not to breathe. For a moment, it seemed the beast would pass. It stalked around the chamber, tail smashing against the walls. Then its head turned sharply, its glowing eyes locking onto the faint light of their hiding place. The human's heart leapt in his chest. The beast roared, the sound tearing through the cavern like a storm. The girl pulled him back just as the monster lunged. Its claws ripped through the stone, sending shards flying. They scrambled deeper into the crack, rocks scraping their skin, but the beast forced its head in, snapping its jaws. Its hot breath filled the narrow space, smelling of rotten death. The human grabbed a stone and hurled it with all his strength. It struck the beast's face, bouncing off its armored hide. The monster roared louder, enraged. The girl gestured wildly, pointing toward another narrow tunnel branching off. They crawled quickly, their bodies scraping against sharp stone. Behind them, the beast slammed its claws into the walls, breaking stone apart. The tunnel shook as if the entire cavern would collapse. They reached the end of the passage, spilling into a wider chamber. But the monster was close behind, its roars echoing like thunder. There was no escape, no time to run. The girl grabbed a shard of crystal from the ground. It glowed brighter in her hands, pulsing with strange energy. She hurled it against the wall, and the impact sent out a blinding flash of light. The beast shrieked, rearing back as the light burned its glowing eyes. The human saw his chance. He grabbed another shard and struck it against the stone, releasing sparks and fire. He piled dry roots and moss together, the sparks catching flame. The fire blazed, filling the chamber with light and smoke. The beast roared again, furious, but it slowed, its movements hesitant in the fire's glow. The human's mind raced. He remembered the loose stones above, hanging like teeth from the ceiling. If he could bring them down, maybe the beast could be trapped. He grabbed a sharp rock and began striking at a weak point in the wall. The girl understood instantly. She pressed her glowing hands against the ceiling roots, feeding energy into them. The roots shuddered. The ceiling cracked. The beast lunged forward in rage, smashing through the flames. But before it could reach them, the ceiling gave way. A rain of stone and crystal crashed down on the monster. The chamber shook as the beast roared, trapped beneath the weight. For a long moment, the only sound was falling dust. The human coughed, his chest burning from smoke and fear. The girl pulled him up, her glowing face close to his. Her eyes were wide, not with fear now, but with respect. He had not run, he had fought, he had survived. Together, they had stood against the darkness. Together, they had proven stronger than the beast. But the victory was not complete. From beneath the rocks, the monster still growled. Its massive body shifted, claws scraping against the stone. It was not dead, only trapped, only slowed. The girl looked at him, her face serious. She knew what he knew. This was only the beginning. The underground was filled with creatures like this. If one beast had awakened, others would follow. And if they wanted to survive, they would have to fight again. That night, as they rested far from the ruined chamber, the human stared into the glowing shard he had kept. Its hum was stronger now, as if it had awakened with the battle. He wondered if this was why her people had survived so long. Not because they were stronger than the beasts, but because they had learned how to fight with light, with crystal. With courage, the girl sat near him, her head bowed, her hands folded as if in prayer. Her glow flickered faintly, her body tired but unbroken. The human knew then that their fragile bond had become something more. They were no longer just survivors in the dark, they were warriors. And the underground had just learned that it would not claim them easily. The beast's roar still echoed. In his mind, even as they left the shattered chamber behind, the human walked beside the alien girl, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. They had survived the impossible. Yet he knew survival was only temporary. The monster was still alive, trapped but not defeated. And somewhere in the endless dark, others like it were waiting. The girl led him through winding tunnels. Her glow soft but steady, her face was calm. But her eyes held worry. Every few steps she stopped, listening to the walls, feeling the ground. She seemed to know the underground better than she knew herself, as if the roots, the crystals, the stones all whispered their secrets to her. The human trusted her completely now. Without her, he would have been bones in the dark. But trust alone would not bring them out of this endless maze. They needed a way to escape. Hours passed as they walked deeper. The air grew cooler, carrying a faint humming sound. At first the human thought it was his imagination, but as they turned another corner, the sound grew louder, a vibration that traveled through the stone and into his bones. The girl stopped, her glowing eyes wide with recognition. She looked back at him, then pointed ahead. Her steps quickened, almost urgent. They emerged into a vast cavern, and there it was. At the center of the chamber stood a massive machine. Half buried in stone and roots, yet still alive. Its surface was covered in markings like the walls of her people's ruins. Large rings of crystal rotated slowly, humming with soft blue light. Pipes and cables, long forgotten, pulsed faintly, as if they carried veins of energy. The human stared in disbelief. It looked ancient, older than anything he had ever seen, and yet it breathed with power, like a heart still beating after centuries. The girl stepped forward with reverence. She placed her hands against the glowing surface, and the machine responded. The humming grew louder, the lights brighter. She whispered words he could not understand, her voice filled with awe. The human walked closer, his eyes scanning the strange design. It was not just a machine, it was a gate. He could feel it in the way the air shifted around it. This was a door, a way out. Maybe it led to the surface, maybe to another place entirely. But it was hope, and that was enough. The girl turned to him, her expression serious. She touched her chest, then pointed at the machine. Her hands moved in gestures, trying to explain. Through her symbols and expressions he began to understand. This was how her people had once moved between the surface and the underground. It was their path to safety, their last defense against the monsters. But now, it was broken. The rings turned weakly. The lights flickered. It needed power, more than the faint glow of roots and crystals could provide. The human felt his heart sink. Hope was here, but just out of reach. He looked around the chamber, searching for anything. That was when he saw the deep scars in the stone. Massive claw marks carved into the walls. His stomach tightened. The source of power they needed was guarded by the beasts. The girl confirmed it with a nod. Her people had once drawn energy from special crystals guarded by the monsters. Without them, the machine would never awaken fully. If they wanted freedom, they would have to risk everything. The human clenched his fists. He remembered the beast they had faced. The roar, the claws, the red eyes. He remembered the fear, but also the fight. They had survived once, and they could do it again. He turned to the girl, tapping his chest, then pointing at the machine, then at the tunnels. She frowned, shaking her head, her glowing eyes filled with worry. She wanted him to stay, to wait, to be safe, but he shook his head firmly. Survival without hope was not enough. If they did nothing, they would die slowly, trapped forever. If they fought, they might win. The choice was clear. The girl's eyes softened. For a long moment she stared at him, as if weighing his spirit. Then she sighed, lowering her head. When she looked up again, there was determination in her glow. She touched his hand, a silent agreement. Together, they would face the danger. Together, they would bring power to the machine. They prepared as best they could. The human sharpened shards of crystal into blades. The girl showed him how to use glowing moss to mask their scent. They gathered roots and stones, anything that could serve as weapons. The human studied the tunnels, memorizing the paths. His mind was sharp, his heart steady. This was not just survival now, this was war against the dark. That night, as they rested near the machine, the human could not sleep. He stared at the rings turning slowly, flickering with dying light. He imagined what lay beyond them. The surface, the stars, the sky he had lost. He whispered to himself, promising he would see it again. But when he turned his eyes toward the girl, he realized something deeper. Escape was no longer just for him, it was for her too. For her people who had been lost, for the bond they had built, for the fragile trust that had become strength. The underground was vast, dangerous, and alive with monsters, but now they had something the beasts did not. Hope, and in the deep dark, hope was more powerful than fear. The machine waited, silent, but alive. The tunnels whispered with the sounds of approaching danger. The human clenched the glowing shard in his hand. The girl stood beside him, her light steady. Together they looked into the darkness, ready for what was to come. Because tomorrow, they would fight for escape, and tomorrow the underground would tremble again. The cavern was silent, yet the silence felt heavy. The human stood beside the alien girl, both watching the great machine in the center of the chamber. Its rings turned weakly, glowing faintly, waiting for the power it needed. Beyond the tunnels, roars echoed like distant thunder. The beasts were awake, guarding the crystals that could fuel the machine. Tomorrow was no longer a dream. It was a battle waiting in the shadows. The girl moved closer to him, her glowing eyes calm but firm. She pressed her hand against his chest, feeling the shard of crystal he carried. Her other hand pointed at the machine, then to the tunnels, then back at him. Her meaning was clear. If he chose this path, there was no turning back. It would be fight or death, hope or despair. The human nodded slowly, his jaw tight with determination. He had faced the beast once. He could do it again, and now he would. Face it not for himself alone, but for her, for both of them, for the fragile bond that had become unbreakable. Together they entered the tunnels. The girl moved ahead, her light dimmed to a faint glow. The human followed close, his hand gripping the shard like a blade. The tunnels twisted endlessly, their walls carved by roots and claws. Every sound felt louder in the silence, the drip of water, the crunch of stones beneath their steps. Then, at last the chamber appeared. It was filled with massive crystals rising from the ground like jagged teeth. Each one glowed brightly, humming with raw power. But the power was not free. Shadows shifted between the crystals. The beasts were here, waiting. The first roar shook the chamber. From behind a crystal, a monster emerged, larger than the one they had faced before. Its body was covered in armored plates, its claws dripping with glowing saliva, its red eyes locked onto them instantly. The girl raised her hands, sending a burst of light through the cavern. The creature screeched, stumbling back, but more roars answered from the dark. 3 more beasts crawled from the shadows, their growls shaking the ground. The human's breath caught in his throat. It was more than he had expected, but he did not step back. Instead he gripped the shard tighter, his eyes burning with determination. The girl looked at him, and he saw the same fire in her. No fear, only resolve. Together they moved. The girl struck first, pressing her glowing hands against the crystals. A wave of light shot outward, blinding the beasts for a moment. The human charged, hurling sharp stones and shards at the monsters. One beast lunged at him, claws flashing. He rolled aside, swinging the shard like a blade. It cut across the beast's face, leaving a burning scar that glowed. The monster shrieked in rage, smashing its claws into the ground. The human staggered, But he did not fall. He fought like every second was his last. The battle raged in chaos. The girl weaved between the beasts, her light flashing like lightning. Each time a monster lunged at her, she blinded it with her glow. The humans struck from the shadows, using the shards and rocks as weapons. Every cut, every strike was fueled by desperation. The chamber shook with their roars, the ground trembling with violence. At last, one beast fell, crushed by the collapse of a crystal struck loose in battle. The others hissed, circling, but they had seen the strength of their prey. Slowly, growling, they retreated into the tunnels, leaving the chamber. Silence returned, broken only by the human's ragged breathing. He leaned against a crystal, his body bleeding and bruised. The girl came to him, placing her glowing hands against his wounds. Warmth spread through him, easing the pain. He looked at her, exhaustion heavy in his eyes, but she smiled softly, her glow brighter than ever. They had won. For now they had won. The crystals pulsed brightly, their hum filling the chamber. The girl placed her hands against one, and it responded. Energy flowed like water, carried through roots and stone. The hum grew louder, traveling back toward the machine. The human felt the ground vibrate. Hope was alive when they returned to the machine. It was no longer weak. The rings spun faster, glowing with powerful light. The chamber shook as the air shifted. A path of energy opened in the center, glowing like a rising sun. The human stared, breathless. It was real. A way out, the surface, the sky, freedom. But when he turned to the girl, her face was heavy with silence. She looked at the light, then at him, then shook her head slowly. Her body glowed brightly, but her eyes dimmed with sorrow. She pointed at herself, then at the machine, then shook her head again. He understood instantly. She could not leave. Her world was here, in the underground, the air above. The surface light, it was not for her. If he stepped through the machine, he would escape, but she would remain behind alone. Again. The human's chest tightened. He had dreamed of the sky, of earth, of home. The machine offered him everything he had lost. But when he looked at her, standing small and glowing in the dark, he felt the weight of choice. She had saved him, fed him, healed him, fought beside him. She had trusted him when she had no reason to, and now she asked for nothing in return. She was ready to let him go, even if it meant being alone again. He stepped closer, his hand trembling. He touched her shoulder gently, shaking his head. Then he pointed at himself, then at her, then at the ground. His choice was clear. He would not leave her. Not now, not ever. Her eyes widened, glowing with surprise, then softened, filling with warmth. For the first time, she smiled fully, a smile that lit the cavern brighter than the machine itself. Together, they stepped back from the gate. The machine hummed, the light still shining. But neither of them moved toward it. Instead, they sat beside the ancient stones, side by side, not as strangers, not as survivors, but as companions. The underground was still dangerous, filled with beasts and shadows, but they had each other. Together, they could survive. Together, they could build something new. And though the surface was far away, the true light was already here. The bond between them, unbreakable, a human and an alien girl, bound by hope, courage, and choice. In the darkness, they had found something stronger than escape. They had found each other. And in that truth, the future was no longer a burden. It was a promise, waiting to be written.